Okay, so I think it's safe to say we're all a bit tight for cash at the moment, but we can still make delicious and nutritious meals. Today's recipe uses humble, affordable ingredients, but it's totally delicious, lovely and warming, perfect for winter. Let's get cooking. The recipe starts with caramelized onions, which do take quite a while to cook, but in my opinion, it's very much worth it. Since so many recipes start with caramelized onions, what I like to do is I'll caramelize a big batch of them, about 10 to 15 onions, and then you can freeze them in ice cube trays. This means that whenever a recipe calls for caramelized onions, you can just pop a few cubes out and you're good to go. To caramelize the onions, simply cook them in olive oil with a little salt and pepper and just slowly cook them for around 40 to 60 minutes or until they're golden brown and sticky. I usually cook them for about 20 minutes with the lid on so that the onions sort of break down, and then I'll slowly cook them for around 30-40 minutes with the lid off so that all the moisture can evaporate and they get lovely and sticky and golden. Now we've got a quick bit of vegetable prep, starting with one sweetheart cabbage. Simply remove the core and roughly chop.
Pretty good. Really sweet.
You could also use a classic green cabbage, or a savoy cabbage would also work well. As usual, when preparing veg, I always like to make sure my chopping board is nice and secure with some wet paper underneath. Also, I always keep a container for my rubbish nearby, so I'm not walking back and forth from the bin. So in winter, I like to use a floury variety of potato, such as these ones. These are Maris Pipers, and they'll break down slightly and make the soup nice and creamy and comforting. Whereas in summer, I might use a waxy potato, which will hold its shape and not make the soup too creamy. I'm going to cut these potatoes into rough cubes. Don't worry if some are a little smaller. They'll just sort of dissolve into the soup and help thicken it. I'm keeping the skin on as well, as there's a lot of nutrients in the skin and also underneath it. Then I'm going to finely slice some garlic, which is going to slowly cook into the soup and give a nice mellow flavour. Also, I'm going to finely chop some fresh rosemary, which goes really well with the paprika. Get your biggest pan out and heat a tablespoon or two of olive oil. If you don't want to use oil, feel free to use water. We're then going to add the garlic, rosemary, and a bay leaf. Let this sizzle for a couple minutes or until the garlic starts to go slightly golden brown on the outside. We'll then add the caramelized onions. These are the leftovers from the ones I froze. So now if you've batch cooked the caramelized onions, you're saving about 30-40 minutes on every recipe that needs them. Next we'll add the cabbage, and you can just sort of break it up with your hands as you add it. Don't worry if there's a few slightly larger chunks, it'll break down in the cooking process. Then add your diced potatoes, followed by some green lentils, which I've had soaking in water for about 2 hours, just so that they cook slightly quicker. But don't worry if you don't have time to do that. Then a good tablespoon of whole grain mustard. I like using whole grain as it's not quite as spicy as the finer ground mustards. I'm using two types of paprika today. I've got a hot smoked one and then I've got a sweet one. So I'll mostly use the sweet one so we can get a nice hit of the paprika flavor without it getting too spicy. Then I'll add a little bit of the smoked hot one for a little bit of heat and warmth. First add a couple teaspoons of the sweet paprika, followed by a little bit of that spicy one. As you can see, it's much darker than the sweet one. Now for some tomato puree. I don't know about you guys, but I find these tubes extremely annoying. I feel like a lot just gets stuck inside. You can get jars sometimes, which I definitely prefer. Give it all a good stir and cook for a few minutes just to cook out the tomato puree and let it release its natural sweetness. Then we're going to add the vegetable stock, and you're going to see that lovely red colour coming out from the paprika and tomato puree. Stir everything so it's well combined, and we're going to bring it to a simmer, place a lid on top and cook for about 35 to 45 minutes, depending on the size of your potatoes. To finish the soup, I'm going to add a little bit of vegan yogurt just to counteract the spiciness of the paprika, a little bit of pepper and a dash of tamari for that lovely rich umami flavour. And to garnish the soup, I'm just going to finely chop some fresh chives, and then we're ready to serve up. I love making this soup as I've often got some cabbage going slightly old in the bottom of my fridge, and I've always got potatoes and lentils on hand, so this is a perfect way to use up those ingredients and make a lovely hearty warming soup. And then to finish the soup, I'm just going to drizzle over some vegan yogurt, a sprinkling of fresh chives, and I'll probably serve it with a nice bit of crusty bread. That is really good. Really lovely. It's lovely and hearty, perfect for a cold winter's day. It's got a nice warmth coming from that paprika and smoky flavour. And then you've got beautifully soft potatoes, a slight chew in the lentils, which is really nice. Definitely give this recipe a go and let me know what you think about it in the comment section. And yeah, enjoy. If you enjoyed today's video and want some more plant-based goodness, then be sure to check out this one.